Choosing a niche market. So the question is, who are you going to connect best with? So is it going to be based on a geographical area? Maybe it's just really easy for you to work a farm area where you live. And that makes sense because you probably have a lot in common with the people that live there. At the same time, it could be a people farm. Like for instance, maybe you're going to farm your gym. My gym, for instance, has 6,000 members. Could I make a farm out of that? You bet I could. There's lots of things you could do in a gym, for instance, and I'm using this as an example to get traction with the people in the community inside that building. Like for instance, you could have water bottles made up that said, hey, list with Chris, and hand them out every time you go to the gym. So everybody's walking around with your water bottle. You could have t-shirts that say list with Chris, and you could hand out a half a dozen of those as marketing material to kind of get your name out there in the community, inside the gym. You could have a 10K run. There's lots of things you could do, but here's the neat thing. Once people in the gym realize that you're in real estate, don't be surprised. In a very social type of way, while you're working out, they start asking you questions about real estate. They're thinking about buying something, or they're thinking about selling something. Yes, the convenience of you makes it easy for them to ask that question, but the fact that you and them share something in common really helps with the bond, helps really galvanize the relationship. So if you happen to be a person who's a real gym rat and works out, so when you're on a listing appointment with somebody from the gym, you can ask them what's your routine like, how many reps you're doing, how many sets you're doing, what's your cardio, whatever it is, before you even dive into business about selling or listing or buying houses. They get that you get them, and that helps with the relationship. So there's lots of different target type markets or niches that you can identify with. Price range could be style of a house, for instance. For me, when I sold, I've always had a thing for Victorian homes. I grew up in a regular subdivision, and people who had lots of money always lived in big old Victorian homes. So for me, I was always drawn to the architecture, and I loved the inside. I loved how they were built, stick built versus something factory done. I'm always impressed with pocket doors and fireplaces and great foyers and great rooms where people would congregate, 10-foot ceilings. So I developed that as a specialty. I bought an old house, I got into fixing it up, and I would share my enthusiasm for old houses with other people. And I found that when I had those conversations, you quickly identified other people who really appreciated that architecture. Next thing you know, people who liked those type of houses came looking for me, because not only did I know where to get them, I would research all the history on the property, but I'd also know how to go about doing the restoration on them with the baseboards and the wiring and the old fixtures, and how to redo old antique tubs and all of that. That was like my hobby. And because I took something I really enjoyed, other people who enjoyed it came looking for me. And next thing you know, I was kind of giving guided tours on old Victorian homes. I became so good at it that when the banks did appraisals in town, they all called me to do the appraisals on the Victorian homes, because it was my niche, my expertise. They would say, get Chris to do it. He does all the Vics in town, and I would do all the Victorian stuff. So all those big old homes that you would see, that was my specialty. And people who loved that stuff would come searching for me, because they would find out about my reputation. And I had developed excellence in that category. So from your perspective, my question is, what do you like? What type of properties do you like? What type of real estate do you like? What type of clients do you like? Like, for instance, it could be similar interests, common interests. You could be a runner, a jogger, a fisher person, and whatever you like to do, there are other people who like to do it too. The other thing might be past careers. I think of a story about one of my students in one of my classes, and very handsome man in his 60s, looked like Clint Eastwood. And why I always thought that, the gentleman's first name was Clinton. So I always kind of put those two together. He was very well dressed and very well spoken, and did a fair bit of business when he was in my class. But there was something about him. When you met this man, even though he was well spoken and well dressed, slim and handsome, there's something about him that said to you, it was an energy that you need to be careful around this man, because even though he was substantially older than me at the time, the sense you got is this person could hurt you. So I asked him one day, I said, Clinton, what did you do for a living before you were in real estate? And he smiled and he said, it's surprising you should ask. I'm the retired chief of the homicide squad detectives for the city of Toronto. Now, if you spend 30 years looking at bad stuff every day, then of course that stuff kind of permeates into your soul and into your suit. No matter how well you get dressed up, it's still there, isn't it? And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. He said, most of my business, and this is how he termed them. He said, most of my business comes from the coppers. That's what he called them, coppers. He said, I advertise in their magazine. I advertise in their newsletter. I donate to the Widow and Orphans Fund. I go to every party for the new people that are getting introduced, the ones that are joining the police force, and everybody who's retiring. Now, the police force has about 20,000 members. He said, I don't know 99% of them, but they know me. It's really hard not to be the retired chief of the homicide squad and for the rest of the police force not to know you. Here's the thing, he said, when we're going in on a listing appointment for a police officer, and he said, that's where most of my business comes from. And he said, I'm competing with a civilian. He said, I always get the listing. See, cops trust cops. That's what he said. Cops don't trust the rest of the public. So the point I'm trying to make is there's something for everybody, but you need to take a step back to figure out what's your thing. Once we know what your thing is, then your marketing message, your frequency, who you're sending it to, what it's all about, then it all starts to take shape. So is it a past career? Is it something you enjoy to do? Is it the type of clients that you share the most with? These are all the questions that I need you to think through methodically. Before you start advertising, before you send out marketing pieces and newsletters and flyers and doing stuff on social media, who are you sending it to? Why are you sending it to them? And do you have a solution for their problem? Are all of the fundamental questions you need to ask? And then the next thing I want you to understand is once you identify with a niche, is there enough of them to warrant the time and the investment? Yeah, that might be something you're really into, like pottery or something, but maybe there's not enough pottery people in town to make it worthy of the investment, the time, or the energy. So we got to make sure that there's at least probably 200-300 of them, maybe 5 would be the nice number. And then the next question I have for you is, do you connect well with people in this demographic? Remember the lady who wanted to sell rich houses. If she doesn't come from expensive house neighborhoods, then she's not going to make that connection. So real simple, like if you weren't selling them anything, could you sit down and break bread and carry a conversation all evening? And would it be like a lot of fun? And would you be really enjoying their company? Because if that's not you, then not that you can't do it, it's just going to be hard to do it. It's going to feel like work instead of feel like pleasure. And then once you figure out who that group is, can you organize them in your CRM system in a mail campaign and social media wise, but can you get in touch with them regularly? Can you make that connection? Can you make the contact? That's part of this exercise. You got to ask yourself that question as well. Now, if you're going to pick a neighborhood, then you should understand the demographics. Every neighborhood has different demographics, different people live there. And I know that we have to be thoughtful about fair housing laws. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'll give you an example. The town I'm from was a town of about 15,000 people originally. On the east side of town were the working people, the blue-collar people. And on the west side of town were the white-collar people. Now, I can tell you that if you take a blue-collar person and try to sell them into a white-collar neighborhood, they don't feel that they deserve to be there, and they're uncomfortable with that. At the same time, if you take somebody from the white-collar neighborhood down to the blue-collar neighborhood because there's a great house, even though the neighborhood's inconsistent, they'll be like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work for us. So you need to know the neighborhood. You need to know who lives there, the demographics, the age, the makeup. Putting a young family in a neighborhood with no children doesn't make any sense. Putting the seniors or baby boomers in a neighborhood that's overrun with children, and when they, every morning there's 30 kids in front of their house waiting for the school bus, that's not going to work either. So the point I'm trying to make is who lives here? How much money do they typically make? What kind of cars do they drive? What do they normally do for a living? How affluent are they? Are they working people? Are they, people who are much more sophisticated and further developed? What's their education like? You need to know sort of the whole makeup of the community. And once you understand that, then you'll have a better idea what message would really work for them and how frequently you're going to put it out and what it's going to look like and all of those things. So my suggestion is research the target market. As the carpenter says, you measure twice, you cut once. So my suggestion is before you start running out and doing a whole bunch of advertising, take a little bit of time and take a look at how many people in that farm area, for instance. What's the turnover rate? How many homes sell there annually? How much have homes gone up? How long does it take to sell a home? What's the average median price in your community? How much does the average person make? And can they afford to buy the average house? These are all questions that are all part of the research that's necessary to make sure we do the right stuff and we spend our money really wisely.